Parking fines, private parking fines, Ben, those private parking firms that you just think, oh, you nabbed me, they're going to be told to be a little bit more considerate or more lenient to give drivers half a chance to escape fines.
Fairer and more consistent. Many will know that dread of receiving a penalty notice for parking, but what about the rules that govern the way those companies impose those charges? That's what I'm talking about this morning. Yes, the British Parking Association and the international parking community, the trade bodies representing private parking companies, have published a new code of practice for their members, and they say this will provide more consistent rules. One of the key elements is the introduction of a 10-minute grace period. So every vehicle in a private car park will get 10 minutes after the ticket's expired before a penalty is issued. Another requirement will be to ensure that rules around parking on private land are clearly marked with signs. And this new code also keeps an existing cap on parking penalty charges at a maximum of £100, reduced to 60 if paid within 14 days. These rules come into force in the autumn. Firms will have until 2026 to comply with some elements. 5 years ago, Parliament decided the government should set up a code of practice enforced by law, but legal challenges and the election mean that hasn't yet been published. And the industry's own code, well, that doesn't go far enough for the motoring group, the RAC.
So this code is very much something of a misdirection and smacks of marking their own homework. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some good things in it, a 10-minute grace period, some rules for operators, etc. But it is nowhere near what the real official government code will actually do for drivers.
Well, joining us now is Sara Roberts from the British Parking Association. Sara, we have had pages and pages of emails and WhatsApps from people. So let's see if we can figure out how the guidelines might help them. One example that we've had is about an honest mistake. Someone said that they paid £1 to park in Bradford town centre, put the registration number into the machine, one digit was wrong. They're now ending up having to pay £200 despite evidence that they paid, and it was all in good faith. Will the rules help this person?
Absolutely. The sector have got together, that's the British Parking Association and the international parking community, to raise standards across the sector. And the new code that goes live is available now to the public and will be implemented from the 1st of October. Actually brings about a lot of raising standards clauses. So there's clear signage requirements for motorists, there's a mandated 10-minute grace period, and there's also an appeals charter. And the appeals charter will specifically address the instance that you're talking about. You know, there is processing that's done by parking operators when they're looking at the technology and people inputting their vehicle registration. And it's expected that a single digit like that should be picked up at the processing stage and the charge would never be issued. If a charge does get issued, the motorist must appeal. And this is something that we stress all the time, appeal.
Did that person appeal?
They appealed and they said that they still have to pay this £200.
So, I mean, what that says to me is you said they've come together to raise standards. They knew that they know that standards have not been good enough, and they've got away with it up till now.
So, in 2020, we introduced keying error clauses within our code of practice. So if that had been identified and the operator hadn't dealt with that appropriately, then that appeal should have been successfully...
Can I just check then, Sarah? So, in that instance, and sometimes it is useful to focus on one thing, you said it's expected that if there was a single digit...
They must.
Oh, that's a different phraseology.
Absolutely. So I would expect them to do that, and if they didn't, they weren't complying with the code.
In the future, if that had happened, someone had written in and they carried on getting the fine, what would actually happen? Because people get scared, you know, but they might get fines, they might get letters. What would actually happen in practice?
The motorist must appeal, and the guidelines, the sector code that we're launching today, mandates that in certain circumstances charges must be cancelled. If that was identified, that charge must be cancelled.
Or what? What if that just doesn't happen?
Well, it will be cancelled.
Do they get fined? Do they lose their licences?
We have the sector code will have a consistent. This is a joint sanction scheme drafted by the international parking community and the BPA. We've worked together.
What's the sanction?
There are various sanctions, so you would look at what's actually happened. We've got it's all documented within the code of practice, but it's very much like, you know, your driving licence. There's a point system. You commit a contravention, and you're issued with 3 points.
So they could lose their licence?
They could lose their licence.
Right, okay.
We would have a sanction scheme.
We've had so many specific instances, but there's one that I want to pick out that would apply to so many people. This is from Andrew Williams, who says that his point is that sometimes the amounts exceed this £100 cap, that it's 170 in many car parks, and it's to do with the evidence and the proof. He said fines are given out without any evidence or proof. Is it on the parking operator to provide evidence you've broken the rules, rather than you as a driver having to prove that you didn't break the rules?
In the sector code, we're specifying in certain circumstances the type of evidence that motorists can provide. So we would ask motorists to provide evidence.
But should it be on the motorist to provide the evidence of their innocence? Shouldn't it be on the car park operator to provide evidence?
In some instances, it's not possible to know what's actually happened. Private parking operators are trying to protect spaces like blue badge bays. And if a blue badge is not displayed in that bay, then that's potentially blocking somebody who's vulnerable in society and needing access to that space.
But should they provide evidence of the photo of the car without the badge?
They
or is
should,
it the
absolutely. They must
provide the evidence of the badge.
The operator must capture the evidence that a contravention has occurred. And then the appeals charter will allow for a blue badge, owner, somebody who's got a blue badge, if they actually forgot to display it on that day, that they can provide that after the event and have their appeal dealt with according to the sector code. So it's great news. This is really great, a good news story for motorists. There's going to be clear signage, a mandated 10-minute grace period, an appeals charter. It's really good news.
We're out of time. We could talk about this for much longer,
Absolutely.
but thank you very much for coming in.
Sarah Roberts from the British Parking Association.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.